Paola Mendoza reminds me a lot of myself, a jack of all trades and a master of storytelling. Paola is a novelist, an organizer, an activist, a filmmaker, you name it, she does it. This is a beautiful conversation on art and the meaning of art and process and the tsunami of creativity.
One of my favorite quotes of all time is Brecht. And it's really been the mantra of how I've lived my artistic life. And he says, art is not a mirror with which to reflect society, but rather a hammer with which to shape it.
This is a fun one, y'all. Enjoy it, and I will see you on the other side. What inspired your mom to leave Bogota?
It was a confluence of a lot of family disruptions happening in Colombia at the time. It was the 80s. And so I would say the impetus was that her marriage was falling apart. And so she decided that going to the States was a fresh start for all of us. And so I was 3 and my brother was 7. And my mom was very young. She was in earlier 20s. And so by happenstance and a fluke, my mom actually was an American citizen. She was born in the United States and then left back to Colombia when she was 6 months old. But she took that as a possible sign to restart her marriage and start a new life. And so we were the first ones in our family to immigrate to the United States. And her marriage still fell apart. And we got to the States, we got to LA. So we immigrated to Los Angeles. I always like to say that we were like the only Colombians in LA at that time. And a few months after we arrived to the States, my dad told my mom that he was going to work, and then he never came back. He abandoned us.
Whoa.
Yeah, so he left my mom with a 7-year-old, a 3-year-old, no English, no family, a couple $100 in her pocket, and nothing else.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was the beginning of our lives in the United States.
Have you ever closed the door on that conversation, or have you?
With my father?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I've written the movie. I've made a movie about it. I've written books about it. It's been a lifelong artistic well, if we will. But the beautiful thing about that is that it really, no therapy could have given me the amount of healing and understanding and forgiveness ultimately of my father's actions. And I don't have a relationship with my father. And through my process of forgiveness, what I've come to realize, and this happened in my late 20s, early 30s, that forgiveness doesn't mean necessarily being open to a relationship. It means simply that I wrote this movie called Entre Nos, and I directed it, and it did really well. And in the process of writing that movie, what was extraordinary is I had to, as a writer does, you have to understand your characters. And so I had to put myself in the character of my father's shoes. And I had never done that before because I was so filled with anger and literal hatred towards my father that I never thought about the reasons why he might have done what he did. And when I was writing Entre Nos, I came to realize that my father, at the end of the day, while the decision obviously was terrible to abandon his family in the most cowardly way possible, what it boiled down to is that he just wasn't a strong enough person to deal with what it means to be an immigrant in this country, to come and have the responsibility of 2 children and wash dishes and clean cars and be a gardener at the beginning and work and sacrifice himself for the betterment of his children. And he didn't have that strength. And when I realized that, I felt compassion for him. And I felt a deep sadness for him because he made a decision that dictated the rest of his life of not having a connection with his entire family. And so when I was able to understand that as a writer, I was able to understand that as a daughter and as someone that was harmed by him, and then also find forgiveness. And yet, in that forgiveness, it was very clear to me that my father's faults are still his faults, and he still wasn't able, even though it was 20 years later, to have a healthy relationship with me. So I don't have a relationship with my father, and I haven't since I was 21 years old. That was the last time I spoke to him.
I had the blessing of being able to interview my parents for a project, and I had to interview them, not as parents, but as people. So like very objectively. And I found a lot of medicine in that because I was like, oh, you're just people doing your best. And I never asked them these questions when I was young because we don't ask them things like, oh, you had a whole life? Like, you're figuring stuff out on top of keeping me alive? Wild. And so you got some medicine from making art. I got some medicine from making art in relation to our parents and to healing and forgiveness. How do we give that to a non-artist? What does that mean? Is it just reimagining a situation, reapproaching it, stepping in someone else's shoes?
I think the beauty, at least for me, of being an artist is my journey as an artist when I'm making something is to find truth. How can I, whatever it is that I am creating, get to the closest part of truth as possible? And I believe that true, when you arrive to the closest, the more truthful art you have, the more beautiful it is and the more impactful it is, and the more honest, obviously, it is. So if we think about that, I think for non-artists, one can still seek truth in life. And in that seeking of truth, it can come in many various forms. You know, we have as artists a goal at the end. I had a movie that I wanted to make, and you had another artistic endeavor that you wanted to get to. And so that was our goal. But I think people, their goal can be healing. And we get to healing through truth. And what do we create with that truth and with that healing for ourselves if we're non-artists? And even for artists, it doesn't necessarily have to be for others when we're in creation, though oftentimes it is. I think that's the path. And that's why I'm so deeply, deeply grateful to be an artist. And when I told my mom at the age of 17 that I wanted to be an artist, she flipped the fuck out. She was like, I didn't come to this country. We weren't homeless. We didn't starve when we first got here. So you could go and be a starving artist. Like, what is wrong with you? She didn't talk to me for 2 or 3 weeks. And as a child of an immigrant, I'm sure those that are immigrants can probably relate. Like, my mother's approval and what I do with my life is really important to me because I know everything that she sacrificed in order for me to be here. So at the age of 18, when she was so mad at me that she didn't speak to me, it really like shook me. It was like, oh, fuck, like, what do I do? Like, my mom thinks that I shouldn't do this, but I really want to. And it was a lot of soul searching. And at the end, I said to her, Ma, this is what I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to figure it out. So you can either not talk to me or you can support me. It's really up to you, but I'm still moving forward here. And that was like a big deal that I disappointed my mom in that way. And now my mom's my biggest fan and she supports everything. But like that thing of making a choice to be an artist and as an immigrant was extraordinarily fraught. And yet it is the best decision I've ever made in my life, besides having my son. And it has been the foundation of everything that I do.
What at 17 or 16 or 15 or 14 gave you the courage and armor and conviction that this is what I'm going to do?
Well, it also stems back from my father. Like, I was a very angry adolescent. I was a very independent young person. And I grew up in a place that didn't really have the support systems that I needed. And we didn't have the financial recourses to help me in a healthy way. I didn't have therapy. I didn't have access to healthy relationships, all of those things. So my adolescence was crazy. Like, it was insane. So much so that my mom had to send me back to Colombia because I was just losing my mind. And when I came back to the States, I just did my 1 year, I did my senior year of high school in the States. Everything else was in Colombia. I got, by luck, put into a theater class. It was the first theater class that my high school had in like 30 years or something, because it was a very underfunded and continues to be underfunded high school. And I just fell in love. I was like, whoa, like, I can put my anger here. I can create here. It was just a world I had never had access to, that I had never experienced. And when things happen in life, when you're just like, oh, this is meant for me, that's what the theater was for me. It was just like, it was meant for me. We got to go and see a play, a professional play, and it was August Wilson's Seven Guitars. And I watched that, and it was the entire theater was all high school students, and everyone was like going crazy and being wild in there. And I was just enthralled and I loved it. And then I got to go back to the school, to my class, and for some reason, I was like teaching the lesson of seven guitars. So I like taught like a 3-day course about seven guitars of just like what my thoughts were essentially. And it was so amazing. So that's why, because I was able to express myself in ways that my community and my family hadn't given me the ability to do so before that.
Mm.
And then that was like, I was happy. And so when my mom was like, this is terrible, I was like, no, this is really good. It was super clear for me how good it had been for me by the time I made the decision to tell her I wanted to be an artist, an actor at the time, though I'm no longer that.
That is actually one of the beautiful reasons I wanted to chat with you, is because you are an artist who does many different things, as I deeply resonate with. I lived in Serbia after college doing theater,
Oh, oh, you're a
and
theater artist too? Did you go to Cal Arts for theater?
I did, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, I love it.
And I was working with this biomechanics specialist, and he said, really intense Russian dude, and he said, the jack of all trades is the master of none. No one is a master anymore. And this was hard for me for years because I wanted to be a master, like I wanted to be a samurai. But I also liked so many things. Like I also wanted to juggle and do this and. And then one day I discovered storytelling. That's kind of what really changed my life. I won the Moth a few times, and
Mm-hmm.
I understood that no matter what I was doing, I was facilitating story, that like I
Mm.
could master story, whether it was a book or acting on television, or that it was story. Like I'm here to facilitate story. And so I want to know your relationship to being a jack of all trades.
It's so interesting. I've never been asked this question, but I've thought about it so much because I also, that quote has been stuck ingrained in my brain for a very long time. And I've also, in many ways, felt that I never mastered anything. Like I studied theater. I have my master's in the theater. So the thing that I've studied the most, and the thing that I am, my craft that I know the most is acting, specifically for theater. And everything else is self-taught. I wrote my first novel on my own. My second and third novel also. Like I never have taken a writing class, literally any writing class, but for fiction or nonfiction. My first screenplay was Entre Nos. I never had taken a screenwriting class. I directed Entre Nos because I was self-taught filmmaker, because I had decided to make documentaries previous to that, and I understood the mechanics of documentary filmmaking. And then I was like, okay, I understand acting, I understand story, I'll figure out directing for film. And I did, like while we were on set. And I've also I don't have an ego when it comes to not knowing things. I'll be like, wait, what? Why is that a jump cut? Like, explain to me that. DP, why would you not do that? And then I surround myself with people that are okay with that, that don't make me feel less than because I don't know anything, or not anything, but I don't know that thing. The other thing, while I have had, and I believe that I am a successful artist, I'm a working artist. I'm not extraordinarily famous. I like get gigs, I do my gigs, I've had success, but I'm a working, and I like to say a working class artist. Like it's every day. I'm in the hustle. I don't have a guaranteed income. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing next week. Like I create my own shit and I do it and I love it. But I think part of that is because I'll make a movie and then I'll go and write a book for 3 years. And then I'll go and I'll organize for 3 years. And then I'll come back and I'll write my second book. So it's not like, from a strategy standpoint of one is looking at one's career, I'm not necessarily building off of one's successes as traditionally other people might advise one to do.
Does that upset you?
Sometimes when I don't know like what the fuck I'm gonna do, how I'm gonna pay my rent next month, I'm like, what am I doing? But at the same time, I've had such a fulfilling, extraordinary artistic life. And I've also come to the conclusion a few years ago, I started saying, like, I'm a storyteller. At the end of the day, like, the stories come into my heart, into my brain, and then I figure out what medium do I want to tell this story in. Do I want to do a film? Do I want to make a play? Do I want to write a book? Do I want to do an art installation? Is it performance art? And it kind of answers itself in the process of when I'm thinking about it and creating it. So I too am a storyteller and I love it, but it took me a while to get there. And I think it's been the best thing for me.
You said you've had a fulfilling life.
Mm-hmm.
Is that truthful? Because I feel like, because I'm also an artist, it's just like, what's next? That's my big battle as also as a Buddhist, is like, I don't enjoy the thing that's here because it's always what's next.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's next? What's next? What's next? We get to fall into these cycles, which I also think is related to capitalism and society, and do more, have more, make more, be more. But have you enjoyed these things? Do you enjoy them? What's the trick to enjoying them? If you really are fulfilled, what's that trick? Because I think a lot of people aren't fulfilled. I think you could win 17 awards and still think what's next, or see the one thing you didn't get.
I am fulfilled in the sense that I try to focus on the process as an artist. In the process, I try as best as I can for it to be a good, compassionate, kind, fulfilling process for all. And that doesn't mean that shit hasn't gone down and things haven't been bad and like things have fallen apart. All those things are true. But what I am in control of, I try to make the process be great, because at the end of the day, I can't even really control in many ways the outcome or how the final product is received by people. I definitely can't control that. So I try to focus on the process. And that doesn't mean that I don't wish things would have been different or I would have gotten more money, or, I always joke, I'm like, my movies have been seen by 4 people. My books have been read by 3 people. Like, it's the hardest part for me is getting the art to be seen. And it's so exhausting. And I'm always like, oh, this uphill battle. Why the fuck do I do this? Like, God damn it. I got to get people to read this book, or I got to get them to watch this movie or apply to festivals, and all of the rejection. It's hard. Like, there is no doubt that being an artist is not hard, and it is not for the faint-hearted. And I tell my students, if there's anything else that you can do in your life that will make you happy, go do that. Go do that. But if this is the one thing that's going to make you happy, focus on that and find the joy and be smart about what you're creating and why you're creating. And also, we do, because we live in a capitalist society and we do have to pay our bills, got to figure out how to make it financially feasible. And I think it's important to share these things. Like, I didn't get my first real professional grant until I was in my late 30s. Like, that's just hard. Like, I was hustling. I graduated grad school when I was 25 years old. I didn't get my first real grant until I was 38 years old, 37, 38. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, what's wrong with me? I applied for so many, I didn't get one. So the hustle is still real, but I am fulfilled because there's no other life that I would want to be living than this. Because if there was, I would go and do it, because there's a lot of heartbreak, but there is so much joy in it.
What is your listening process like? So if you create so many different things, I'm going to go be an advocate right now, or this, or make the movie or the book. What's the listening process that says this time to focus on this?
I just was recently going through this because I finished my latest book. Solis just came out in October. And then I was on book tour basically up until the election. And then the election happened. And obviously not obviously, but I was destroyed by it. And so I was really like, okay, what do I want to do? What do I want to work on? Because also the work that I do, like, it tends to be years. It's a year commitment, multiple year commitment. It took us 3.5 years to write. Entre Nos, it was a 5-year project. And there's things that I do in between that are shorter, but like my projects take a long time. And I had a lot of different ideas. So I have this process that I've started recently where I have this glass container on a shelf. And if I get a creative idea, it doesn't have to be good, just a creative idea, I'll write it down on a piece of paper, I'll put it in the container so that I have literally a container of ideas so that I don't have to hold them in my brain. And normally the idea that I can't let go of for a while is the idea that I start like to play with and be like, okay, let's experiment. And is this the thing? And there's been times where I've started a concept, an idea that I had for a while, and then I started to work on it and I was like, nah. I can't do this for 3 years. Like, this is not the one. It goes back into the container. Or I also tell people a lot of ideas too. Like, I love to just have conversations with other people that are working through other things, specifically in movement, and they'll tell me their issues and I'll be like, well, this idea and that idea and this idea. So I'm like, I don't have to make these ideas happen. I just get to be creative and think of these ideas. And then you go forth and try to figure it out. I don't care. So I'm very free-flowing with ideas, except for the ideas, obviously, that I really want to work on. Those then become mine. And then I'm just like a very private, quiet endeavor until it's not. So I don't know. They choose me. I think about it. And then it's just a guttural thing. Like, is this the thing that I want to do for 3 years? And I'm not going to be untruthful. Like, Is there a place for, can I get funding for it? Can I get a grant for it? Is it a type of project that actually will be financially feasible in some kind of way for me? Because I got a kid and I'm co-parenting him, so I got to raise him. So like I do have to also have my feet on the ground somewhat with regards to the finances.
What I'm really resonating with what you said is the generosity of ideas, because I do believe if you don't hoard something, you get more of it.
Mm,
I am a believer to he who has more shall he receive. Uh,
mm,
just in a general abundance mindset, and I don't mean manifesting like money this da 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 da. It just means like we keep the flow going, like
yeah,
a healthy river, a healthy right. You can't be stagnant, and so you keep the ideas going, whether they're yours or you share them or you put them in a jar. They're gonna keep coming, and so you
yeah.
just keep the movement, keep the current flowing so that these beautiful fish can eat.
Totally. And like creativity is a muscle, it really is. And so if you are just constantly working that muscle for yourself, for others, for the unknown, like it just continues to grow and get stronger and get better. I believe if there's a good idea and I can't get it done for whatever reason, it might be my idea, but I might not be the best person to get it done. I want to see that in the world. Go out and do it, because what's it gonna do for the world if it's just in my brain or in my jar? But one has to know, like, oh, this is my idea, this, I want this for me. So then you got to be able to identify that.
Can you share a new exciting idea that you're willing to give the time and love and effort to?
Yes. So I've been working on a new screenplay. I haven't written a feature screenplay since 2016. It's been a while. It's been interesting. It's been fun. It's a genre film within like the thriller horror realm and deals with authoritarianism and immigration. I'm on page 13 or 14, so I'm literally just starting.
Fresh,
Yeah, it's super fresh. It's
fresh.
scary. The scary part of the process where I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do for another 80 pages?
Do you just go like you don't have the whole thing worked out? You're just kind of like I'll hit it page by page.
It depends. Like when for Solis and Sanctuary, definitely everything was mapped out. Deep, 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 deep outline. I started to do that with this, but then I got this feeling of you just need to write, because I hadn't written a screenplay in so long. So I was just like, fuck it. So I just started writing and I wrote the first 4 pages and I was like, okay, okay, okay. And then with my producer, we have weekly meetings. So then with her, I'm talking and I'm brainstorming and we think about things. And then I know where it needs to end. I know what the midpoint is. And now I just need to like get to that midpoint. So yesterday I outlined like the next 5 scenes. So I'm kind of doing it in chunks, but it's a very different process than I've ever done. So I just kind of been going with it.
Does your kid want to be an artist?
Oh, my kid. He wants to be a soccer player. He loves soccer, football, but he's really creative. So I always like have him in my like story sessions and we'll brainstorm ideas. And we were talking about the film and we were trying to come up with the antagonist's name. And I was joking. I was like, oh, we should name him Elon Musk, but like change like the order of the letters. And so Mateo is his name. He was like, well, what about Melon Tusk? I was like, okay, Melon Tusk. So that's what we call him right now, though.
It's really good.
So he is creative in story. He really gets into story. I've always told him stories since he was little, but he's so focused on being a football star. That's where his heart is, which is sweet.
What makes a good story?
Ooh. Well, as I always tell Mateo, because we analyze a lot of movies and stories, and he's always like, "Ay, mama, enough. We have to have a
It's
conflict."
like I'm just kind of watching.
He's like, leave me alone. I mean, and I'm also very focused on like traditional Western story in the sense of like a conflict, a 3-act structure. I don't like the structures are very traditional, but I tell very dark. I've been told to not say very dark, but I tell very authentic, painful stories that are emblematic of our world, but give us some hope forward. Like I don't do like a Disney wrap the bow, everything is great at the end. Like my stories make you feel things because I love feeling things when I'm watching art, whether it's theater or films or TV shows or books. Like I want to feel, I want to be devastated, sometimes too much. So it's like, what is that conflict that is also telling us something about the world? One of my favorite quotes of all time is Brecht. And I heard it, I read it when I was in my early 20s, when I was at UCLA. And it's really been the mantra of how I've lived my artistic life, of which I didn't even really realize until probably a few years ago. And he says, art is not a mirror with which to reflect society, but rather a hammer with which to shape it. That's what I try my art to be. I don't want it to be didactic and propaganda, not by any means, but I do want my art to try and shape the world that we want. Art that does that moves people, that inspires people to do something different in their life, to see people in a different way, to make the world better. That is the best art, and that is the art that I strive to make, and then sometimes have been more successful than others in that making of it.
What is it about feeling devastated that people love? Because people do love it. It's not just you.
Yeah.
We love
Yeah.
to feel. We want to feel. What are we not feeling in our daily lives? Or maybe that's just it. Maybe that's why art exists, to turn the ordinary into the extraordinary, right? To make a moment miraculous.
I also think like to see human beings survive, live through, survive, thrive, find lessons in the devastation is the lesson of our lifetime, right? I think a lot about what's going on in California at the moment. I have so many friends, as you do, and families that are there. You're in LA. And I think the devastation is so palpable, and anyone with any sort of ounce of compassion feels that devastation. And I think I'm also believing and wanting and waiting for the moment of like the creation out of this, the rising from the ashes. Who and what will we become? I want to think better, stronger, more compassionate, different. And that's the thing that gives us hope at the end of the day, is seeing human beings struggle in many ways unjustly and unfairly, and yet becoming better at the end, and becoming better not for themselves but for their community, for their families, for strangers, for the world. I think that's the purpose of art, and why we're here, to be of service to one another. I found the greatest joy in organizing when I am of service to others, and when my art is in service to, in many ways, organizers and the movement to help and be in service of.
Earlier, you talked about truth,
Mm-hmm.
and then you said honesty. Are those separate? Those are different.
It's a great question. I think they're different when it applies to art, because we're striving for truth, the ultimate truth of whatever it is that you're trying to get at. The honesty is maybe the process by which we get to that truth.
We are honest in order to get to the truth.
I think so.
You believe in an ultimate truth?
Yeah, I do, I guess, because that's what I'm creating for. And I think the ultimate truth is compassion and to be in service of.
You have students and you tell them, if you can be anything else but an artist, be it. What else do you tell them? Give me like top three.
Oh, my other thing
lessons.
that I love is, I always tell them, and I say this all the time to everybody, don't be afraid to create bad art. Like, we just got to create bad shit. Like, so often we are hampered by the fear of creating something bad. And I'm like, you know what? You're going to create bad art. You know what? I have created bad shit. I've created shit where I'm just like, don't look at that. That's embarrassing and it's terrible. But we got to get through the badness, the bad art, to then get to the good art. Because you create bad art doesn't mean you're a bad artist. And I also tell them, and this is a lesson that I tell myself all the time too, the end of the day, it's about the body of work that we create. If we are artists for our lifetimes, it is about the body of work that we create. So in that body of work, you will have bad art, whatever that means. You hopefully will have masterpieces too. You will also probably more than often just have average art, something that is not great, something that is not bad, but something that was good. And at the end, the body of our work needs to tell the story of what we were exploring in our lifetime. And that is the focus. And it's very much a release and a relief to be like, I don't fucking care if this is bad. It's okay. It's not a reflection of who I am as an artist or who I am as a person. It's very hard to do, don't get me wrong. It is something that I tell students and that I strive to remember myself when I'm in the process of creating.
I 100% agree. I also think it's unfortunate that bodies of culture often feel like we have to have a hit. You know, like white people get to fail all the time.
Totally.
You get to make 3 mediocre things before you make 1 great thing. But I do believe there is a narrative, and maybe there's some truth to speaking to Hollywood. I don't know that I'm speaking to kind of, I think every medium where you really want to make it. If you are a body of culture, you are just held at a far higher standard. Like, if the first one didn't go, why would I take a chance on the second? You know, we use it as a like Told You So. I think I saw Monique on a podcast. She said, if I was white, who would I be? Melissa McCartney.
Mm,
Monique said, if I was white, who would I be? Melissa McCartney. Like,
yeah.
I also had a show. We're in syndication, 5 years, da 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 da. This, where's my blank? Where's my,
It's so true. And like that's the reality of being an artist in a capitalistic system. Like art is commodified and art is in exchange for money and art is a product. Like I hate when people are like consumption, the consumption of art. I'm like, oh, it kills my soul. Because I want people to experience. I want people to feel it. I don't want them to consume my art. It's not a piece of food that goes through your body. Like I want it to like live inside of you and live in your heart, hopefully for years and sometimes decades. Like there's things that I'm sure it happens with you too. You're like creating and you remember an artistic reference literally from 15 years ago and you're like, oh shit, like yeah, that thing, it's been living inside of you for so long. That is the hope of art outside of a capitalistic system.
well, yeah, August Wilson in high school has brought you here, and Brecht in your 20s has brought you here, and it just takes one. I say that art, you cannot prepare yourself for the ways art can move you.
Mm,
Good art, honest art, truthful art. If you go to therapy, you kind of have to be prepared to take off the armor.
mm,
If you're in a relationship, you kind of have to be prepared to take off the armor to do the work. But
mm.
you can walk into a museum or go see a play, and it can find the cracks in your armor and really fuck you up in the best ways. But only the best art can do that.
Totally. But I want to know, why do you think we like to be devastated?
I believe our relationship to devastation is one to being alive. Feelings are proof of life, and I'm not sure we always know we're alive or why we're alive,
Mm,
because it's so easy to just coast. It's so easy to float along, wake up, drink coffee, go do the job, pee a couple times, maybe laugh if I'm lucky, scroll on my phone, rinse, repeat. Oh, I'll have a drink with you tonight. Like, and then I do it all over again. And then I think every once in a while you feel
mm,
it breaks the cycle. It
mm,
breaks the monotony. It breaks the calendar. It breaks time. It makes time longer. And that is life. We're living.
mm.
And I think art does that better than most things. The early stages of a relationship do that really well. They break the time. They break time.
That's really beautiful. I love that. I love that. I want a tsunami of creativity. Yeah, a tsunami of creativity. And I think everything that you said there about why we are attracted, some people, most people, to devastation in stories, in art. Like I think like all that description was like the idea of like a tsunami of creativity. That's what I feel like it would do for me in that moment. In addition to, yes, that's what it feels like to be devastated when you're watching amazing, crazy, mind-blowing art that breaks your heart into a million pieces. That just made me think of my tsunami of art or
Maybe
creativity.
that's
Sorry.
maybe that's the title, a tsunami of creativity.
Mm.
Or a hammer to shape the world. There's a lot of good titles in here. I gotta figure out. I gotta settle. I gotta settle on one.
I rarely get to talk about art like this, so I love it. So thank you. I love to just talk about process and art and the why. I'm always talking of which I also enjoy and love, but of organizing and immigration and specific projects in general. So this has been a real joy and pleasure to talk about this with you. So thank you. I would be remiss to not mention the real stress and fear that I have with regards to Donald Trump. Unlike in 2016, where I was organizing the Women's March and I didn't have this lull before he arrived into office in 2016 because I was so focused on the Women's March and it was a very different time energetically, obviously. This time, since the election to January 20th, has been one of almost like hibernation, it feels like, of just hibernation of waiting for the horror to happen. But also, as I told a very dear friend of mine, I was like, I'm just gonna be joyful for the next 8 weeks. Like I'm gonna have all of the luxurious things that I want. I'm gonna just be joyful because who knows what's gonna happen, or I know it's gonna happen after January 20th, and I'm just gonna not be able to be that. But I also, what I'm excited about, and maybe excited is not the correct descriptor, but I do want to see what art comes out of this very dark time. I do want to see us artists rise to the occasion of what we say and how we say it under an authoritarian regime. The world is going to be so fucked up that something's got to be different, both within me and within the world, and how we approach the fucked upness that's coming toward us. And so I am ready, not excited, but ready for how I will and we will collectively respond to this moment in a better way, in a different way, and what beauty will come out of it in order to protect us.
I am prepared and expect many political and climate catastrophes, but also a lot of beautiful art.
Yeah. Yeah.
How can folks hang out with you, learn from you, talk to you, engage with you?
Well, you can always read my books. That's the best way to engage. Sanctuary and Solis, also Entre Nos, is a book, a film. Social media, though, I'm not really active on social media so much right now, guys. Sorry, I can't. It's like deading my brain. So, but there's Instagram always. I'm only on Instagram. I don't do anything else. I'm very responsive to people when they write to me. I'm extraordinarily responsive to teachers. Also, I love to talk to students. So if you're a teacher, hit me up. I'll respond. I'll do Zoom things with your students. I'll go to your classes if you're in New York City. It feeds my soul. I was just with the high school on Tuesday, and it was great.
Okay, that is our time with Paola. I hope you loved it. Please, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, share, send it to your mama, send it to a neighbor, send it to a stranger, send it to a lover. And as always, if you have any questions or ideas, shoot us an email at brownenoughproductions@gmail.com. Again, that is brownenoughproductions@gmail.com. I will see you next week. Peace.